What's going on, St. Louis sports fans? We are back with another episode of Blues Notes Show, brought to you with the St. Louis Sports channel. And today, with the St. Louis Blues, we got a lot to talk about, from the rebranding to the upcoming draft that's coming up on the 30th, and then also free agency and all the uh, fun things that the St. Louis Blues are trying to do. So let's get right into it. So, James, with what came out the other day about the rebranding, we got a chance. I don't know, for all you guys watching at home, uh, if you saw on social media from our posts to what the Blues put out. Obviously, I know a lot of us have seen everything that they put out about the new jerseys. They For the home jerseys, we went with more of like the heritage look, aside from the logo where it had more of a blue outline rather than the cream outline that it had before. And then we had the white away jerseys, which we saw back in 22 whenever we went up against the Minnesota Wild in the outdoor game with them. Aside from what we really saw of these two jerseys so far, the only, I don't really have many gripes on them. What were your thoughts of the new jerseys, James?
Me personally, I love them. I love every bit about it. I don't have issues with any of it. I think they're smooth. I really like the missing of the border of the numbers. I actually like that. I love the away jerseys. That's my next jersey. If anyone's got an idea for a Christmas present for me, I'll take a away jersey Robert Thomas any day of the week.
Okay. Yeah, I was a big fan of the away jerseys that we got now. I know at first I wasn't sure how they were gonna really do the jerseys, but I really like the aesthetic and I really like the feel of them. I'm not sure how I feel yet about the number. I thought they were gonna try to do something a little different, but just kind of going with a flat color, or I guess just the not really having much stitching or much outline or anything with the numbers. I guess it kind of did a little bit of a negative for me personally,
Hmm.
but I know a lot of people like yourself that actually like the look of them and everything. It's Other than that, though, I generally like the look of the new jerseys, and then they were going to be using those for the home and away jerseys, and then obviously they will be using the Royal and Navy jersey as their third jerseys. I'm guessing for a lot of the Saturday games and whatnot.
Right.
They might. From Also, I heard that they may incorporate the '90s jersey at some point. I think that might be next year or some point this year. I'm not exactly sure, but those are just little tidbits that I've heard. Other than that, but
Right. Yeah, I know that they're going to use the 90s jersey as it's going to be
sorry.
that's right, the throwback jersey like they did last year. So, and Brandon, I love the ancillary logos.
Yep.
The fleur de lis looks awesome, and the trumpet is very cool. Like
Yeah, that
incorporating the
was probably the
river
one
and
that I really
March.
liked the most.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, they got the STL again that they had for the Winter Classic helmets last year.
Yep.
That's a future
We'll see.
tat. That's a future tattoo to me.
Yep, and that's something that we're gonna see, the at least the STL logo. That's something that we're gonna be seeing on the shorts or the pants of the jerseys as well. I think it's on the right front leg. So
Yeah, I think so.
that'll be interesting to see how they work all those, and then I think it was the actual verbiage of the St. Louis Blues that you're gonna see at the bottom jerseys on the inside, that the St. Louis Blues, uh like it has like the blue, gray, and uh yellow uh wording to them as well. I would have had pictures, but I didn't really have a whole lot of time to set all that up with being here at work. But
Right.
it's gonna the New Jerseys. I feel like look very very pleasing. I do like them the new logos that they have for the jerseys or for the team themselves.
Definitely.
I'm very happy with what they did. But kind of getting from that and going into something that's going to be coming up here in the next 3 to 5 days. I think it's on Saturday. I think for the draft, the Blues currently are going to have a first overall pick, and then I think it's a fifth and sixth round pick. They
Hmm.
don't have their uh, they don't really have like middle ground picks just because of the offer sheet pickups last year that the Blues had, but they're going in with at least a few picks in this draft. Who's to say if they're going to keep them or use them in a trade for potential ready NHL player for to try to make a run at a deeper run in the playoffs this year. But they got the 19th overall pick. There's a few players that I felt like they could be potentially going for. I know that I've seen a lot of talk about defensive players. I've seen some talk about offensive players, but I'm just going to rattle through some of at least five of them that I've kind of have heard of or think that they would gel well with the Blues. Which at least some of the forwards that I got, there was Cole Reshney, I'm thinking is how you pronounce
Hmm.
his name. He's a 5'11" forward or center, 180 pounds. He's a little bit on the undersized, uh, but his effort and his two-way commitment make him a profitable pick. I know we've been talking that we got a lot of players coming up in the development for the Blues. Aside from Dvorsky, I think most of our other picks are relatively wingers for forwards. So I mean, having a guy like Reshi who's fast, who's good on like a two-way forward, I felt like that's somebody that the Blues could really benefit with. Uh, Brendan, yeah, Braden Cooties. He's a 6 foot center. He's 186 pounds. He's fast and has a good two-way game. Very good skater with strong offensive skills. Another guy that I felt like that would really benefit the Blues, especially with going up for. They're going for more of a speed aesthetic. It seems like have a very good skill on the puck, and these are both really good guys that I felt like would benefit the Blues. I know they're uh, Kudez was looking like he was going to be a little bit higher of a pick. I think they were projecting him to go more of like in the low teens. I think like 11 or 12 or 13. But if something happens where he's able to be picked up in the 19th spot, I feel like that's a potential for the Blues that could potentially go. Other than that, the only other center I had was Jack Nesbitt, who's 6'4", 186 pounds, center, strong physical player with good hands around the net, and has a high hockey IQ. Aside from those three centers, James, did you what were your feelings on at least on the forward side for the Blues if they were to go that route for the draft?
I'm definitely really keen on the Cole Reishi, like you were talking about him.
Yep.
Reading a lot about him, he's got a great hockey intellect. Scouts really like his positioning, and he kind of picks that to be like a future third line center and penalty kill expert. So that's a good depth move. That's a good depth draft. Um, I definitely like Coots. I think he's got a lot of upside. Also, I keep saying I'm gonna stop doing that. On the I don't know if you want to talk defense yet, but I have a couple ideas for the defense because the thing about this draft is really after pick 3, these guys are going anywhere. They're talking about guys who are looking at 19 could go as high as 10.
Yep.
So it's going to be interesting to see who is left with a Blues pick 19.
Yeah, because that was one thing between all the mock drafts and everything that I saw. I did notice that a lot of them were all very different than each other. That
Right.
there was never really one from another mock draft that really had the same kind of order, I guess. So they were all relatively different. But yeah, I mean, I'm open to talking defense. There was two players that I thought that really spoke about the Blues, but I want to hear your picks first. What you
Sure.
thought the Blues would go with?
So the two that caught my attention to the right in that area, in that mid, in that later round part is one's Cameron Reed. He's 5'11", and they say with his shot and his offensive prowess, he can make an upwards of being a number 3 defenseman for your team. He just has development that he has to do, which when you draft 19th of the draft, you're going to see these guys in 4 to 5 years. That's a guarantee. Another one could that could slip to the Blues is Kayshawn Atchison. He's taller and he's going to keep growing, obviously, because he's a young lad. Um, and they have him picked to even be a top 10 defenseman to be picked. So I think those are two guys and they're both right shot defensemen, which is an absolute need that the Blues have. They don't have a lot of right shot defensemen in their minor league system right now. So I think beefing up your defensive core at that 19th pick is really essential. So I think when it comes to a center or defenseman, they don't go wrong either way.
Yeah, I would agree. I do agree with you on the on Cameron Reed. I did feel like he had a lot of upside for the Blues with him being kind of, at least where he's been playing at for where he's been at. He's been an all around top 4 D man. His skating and 2-way ability have been really good, and he competes well and is a very physical player. I felt that that was a defenseman that I feel like the Blues would be interested in going after. The other one that I had, it was a little bit different from your pick. I was looking more at Logan Hensler. He's a little bit of a bigger defenseman. I think he's sitting about 6'2", 6'3".
Hmm.
He's 198 pounds. I think he's a right-handed defenseman. His mobility is good, although they were saying that his defensive and his offensive ability is a little bit on the average side of things, at least what they've seen so far of him in the OHL. But that's something that I felt like, if with him being such a big body and has good mobility, I felt like that's a player that the Blues could potentially bring in and work to their system and maybe be able to bring him up to being a decent defenseman for the Blues,
Hmm.
and especially with them being looking at more at right-hand defenseman. I feel like that's a guy that we don't really have in our development systems as of right now. I mean, I know we have
Right.
Otto Stenberg, you have uh, Adam Jirasek, and a few other guys, and I feel like Hensler could potentially fit into that just as well as Reed.
Yeah. And Hensler's a local boy, too.
Oh, I did not know that about Hensler. I
I only
honestly.
heard that because I was listening to the radio today. They were talking about the draft and they mentioned him as being a local boy. So,
Okay. Now, with with all of this in mind, is this something that, since we've talked about it with the Blues potentially going after some of these picks, maybe a completely different pick, do you, because there's also been talks that like they may use this pick and just use it as a trade piece. Do you think the Blues will look to more use this and actually get a draft player to be able to bring up through our system, or do you think this is something that the Blues will use to potentially get either a center that we could use for the second line or third line, or do you think this is something that we use to go get a ready defenseman that we could use? Since obviously we're not going to have Torrey Krug back. He is listed as being out for the rest of the year, and somebody that we're not going to be potentially getting back in Ryan Suter, just with the defensive depth that we already have.
Well, the hard part with this is not a great draft. A lot of experts are saying this is kind of a mid draft, not as good as like next year. So I I think it can be used as trade bait. It'd just be a matter of what's the package going to be for Armstrong to give up another first round pick. Now,
Yeah.
I mean, they've done it before. They traded a mid round pick plus Yori Laterra for Braden Shen. So it's definitely a possibility that that can happen. And it sounds like to me too. Not only is this draft kind of a mid draft, it does sound like it's going to be a high trade draft. There's already teams talking about trading up or trading down in the draft. So the it's gonna be hard to say come Friday what's going to happen with that draft pick. But
Yep.
again, the Blues only have 3 picks. So I don't want to say it's a crapshoot, but you got to really make it. You got to really make it appealing to give up that first round pick.
Oh, of course. Yeah, I mean, with where they're at too, it's their lineup is relatively good. I mean, you have a couple of pieces that you're going to be looking at in free agency. I mean, you got 3 guys that, as of right now, haven't been signed. You got the 2 unrestricted free agents with Suter and Radek Foxa, and then our restricted free agent, which has been getting a lot of commotion or a lot of talk about, which is Joel Hofer. Which, I mean, Armstrong has come out and said that whatever offers or whatever offer sheets get made out for Hofer, that they are going to relatively come out and match whatever was presented. But I feel like that's something that the team and Hofer are going to be able to relatively be able to work out something, hopefully. But I mean, if you're looking at everything and then having Torrey Krug being out for LTIR, you're looking at relatively 11 million, I think, is what was said that the Blues are going to have in cap space. So I mean, if they're going to go out and use their first round pick on the 19th spot, I mean, we've already seen. I think it was Vancouver and Edmonton have a trade already. I think it was Evander Kane going to the Vancouver Canucks for I think it was a 4th round pick. I think it was
Right.
what I
Yeah,
what
fourth
I
round
saw.
pick. That's a cap clear for Edmonton.
For sure. So I mean, we've already seen traffic with draft picks being used to bring in depth pieces for teams already. So I mean, potentially I could see the Blues maybe doing the same, especially with where they already are at with their development. How many players we have coming through the prospect pool. But I mean, adding another 1 to 3 guys, I mean, that's something that would be also beneficial to the Blues. I mean, not to say that where they get those players at or where they're going to be at in their development will be good or not, but I feel like that's something that would be interesting to see. With all of that, I guess, because the only real piece or only real player that I've really heard of any kind of speculation for the Blues, which I know we've been hearing that they're going to try to deal out Nick Leddy and Justin Falk just to try to clear a little bit of that cap space for the Blues. If they're able to do that, then maybe be able to potentially re-sign Ryan Suter. But aside from that, what if they do that to the point is there any real defenseman that you think that the Blues, if it's even a defenseman, that they would potentially try to go out and get either from a trade or offer sheet or anything of that nature?
So before we started, I scoured social media like crazy. Excuse me, to try and see if something can be located. Is there any potential things? And I saw that Noah Dobson from the New York Islanders. Evidently, there is a Western Conference team that has an offer on the table for the Islanders for Dobson, and that's all that's been revealed. And it sounds like they might be mulling over it. So maybe fingers crossed, Dobson would be a good choice. I
Yeah.
like Dobson. And also I looked at, a couple of people put some trade ideas up. One was JJ Peretka and
Yeah.
uh,
I did see that.
Byron Bowen. And, they threw out there Jordan Kyrou as trade plus conditional pick. I I tell you what, if Boston or not Boston, Buffalo makes that move, that's a sick move by the Blues to make that. Um, you see that those are definitely the ones that have a lot of potential, but that's a lot of money to be signed to those guys because Dobson is an RFA with arbitration rights,
Yep.
and he's looking somewhere around $11 million a year. But
Yeah.
you have another cornerstone defenseman, and your top four not only gets younger, but gets significantly better with a move like that. On the other hand, if the if the trade is going to be, say, a Jordan Kyrou, then you're losing 35 goals a year and a 70-point winger. So again, this is a year where there's going to be a lot of risky moves, and it's depending on what teams want to do to sacrifice to hopefully better their team. And the Blues are in a position to do that if they really want to pull that trigger, I think.
Of course. And I know you brought up uh, Cairo and the potential of him going on a trade. One thing that I did see a few days ago, and I was actually eager to talk about this because this was a thing that we saw that uh, Tage Thompson was eager to look to get out of Buffalo, and that was something that I looked at and I was like, maybe that's something that's could be potential. Like you use that first round pick or conditional round pick, and you send Cairo, which I mean, we've seen Tage Thompson in years past with Buffalo and how well numbers that he's able to put up. Is that something that, aside from maybe the Noah Dobson or the uh, Peter Cut or Byron Bowen, is that something that you feel like the Blues would potentially look at going after?
How could you not? Tage Thompson has a wicked shot. He's a really good young winger. Um, it that was a hard trade to make back in 19 when they got rid of him,
Yeah,
but it also got you Ryan O'Reilly in a Stanley Cup. So that's
that
part
is
of the
it.
thing that comes into that. So if you could get a reunion with Tage Thompson, that would be a nice benefit. I think no matter what trade happens, if Kyrie's traded, it's going to be something that's going to be worth the Blues' while. This isn't going to be multiple picks and prospects for Kyrie. They want a player. They're in a borderline compete mode. They're trying to be playoff contenders, maybe Stanley Cup contenders in the next year or two. And sometimes the way you got to do that, especially the way the NHL is structured right now, is you're going to have to make a trade that might hurt, but it's probably going to bet you need to look for benefits to it.
Of course, and Armstrong even said that they're going to be going out looking for more of hockey trades for like player to player, something of
Hmm.
that nature. I mean, if you look at it, I mean, on paper, I don't have the stats up in front of me, but I mean, you're looking at a Cairo who's 35 goals, I think was like 70 or 80 points, and then Tage Thompson, who I mean, this past year, I don't think he had as good of numbers as what he did in years prior. But I mean, you can use that in a little bit of an advantage to say, hey, we will send you the Jordan Cairo, who's got another 6, 7, 8 years left on his contract. We'll do a hockey trade for these two wingers, and then be able to kind of see what Tage Thompson is able to do with the Blues, especially on a
Hmm.
line with uh, goddamn Dylan Holloway, and then a potential move. I mean, who knows if it's going to be Shen, if it's going to be a different center that we may pick up from free agency or trade. But I mean, having a second line with Dylan Holloway and Tage Thompson, along with whatever they want to put as center, I feel like that would be a dangerous second.
Oh, absolutely. That's a very dangerous second line, and he could move up to that first line with Thomas and Buchnevich. That's also a very good possibility. I like that move if it's feasible. And but again, it's a matter of, and in terms of contract wise, you're only looking at about $1 million difference, where Tage is making just a little over seven, Kyrie's making over eight. So
Yep.
you make that move, but don't forget too, the move has to be done before June 30th. That's when that's when Kyrie's no trade clause kicks in. So
Yep.
if they don't make that move by June 30th, then Kyrie holds all the cards if he wants to be traded. And it's a big if the Blues want to trade him.
Right. Oh, I completely agree. Because, I mean, whenever they had that full line together with Cairo, Shen, and Holloway, that line was probably the most dominant, the most productive on the Blues for the 2-3 month span that they were healthy together.
Yep.
Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. That was one of the best lines in the NHL practically.
So I think that would be hard to do. I mean, especially not knowing, having that unknown of not knowing how Tage would gel with either Shen or Holloway, or a completely new center in Holloway. Who's to say how that would all kind of mold together? But also, I mean, you just brought up a very good point of like they're $1 million uh, in difference from each other. So if you make that move before the 30th, you're looking at relatively 12 million in cap space
Hmm.
before free agency even starts. So with that, I mean, you have for the Blues, from what I could see, and especially if they decide to go out and get another defenseman for the Nick Leddy or Justin Falk to kind of fill in those spots to be able to re-sign Suter. I mean, free agency. I mean, you have an abundance of guys for centers, for defensemen, and some of them that I was looking at. I mean, we have, and this one is a little bit of an outlandish one because I don't think the Blues would actually go for this with just the money involved with him. Was John Tavares from the Toronto Maple Leafs? I thought this was a little bit of an outlandish grab for the Blues. He's kind of a average skater, but his hockey IQ and his hands are very good on the ice.
Hmm.
I especially where he's looking at a projected contract for 3 years of and 7.9 million per year. I've also heard that they might be willing, but that might be for Toronto to go in like a 4.5 million per year. So that, because I did hear before we got on today that they were potentially looking at extension for Tavares, and it was in the realm of like I think 4.5-5 million just to be able to afford him since Marner wasn't going to be coming back to the Maple Leafs. What now? I know I'm thinking that this is more of an outlandish deal. What would you feel with Tavares coming? Which I think there's better options than Tavares, but I want to hear your opinion.
Well, I think for free agency, I don't think it gets a lot better than Tavares because Sam Bennett's going to re-sign with Florida. He was really my
Yeah.
first choice to see if the Blues could go after him, but he outpriced himself because he went God mode in the playoffs. That happens,
That he did.
and he wants to stay in. He wants to stay in Florida.
Yep.
I like Jonathan Tavares for several reasons. One, he has a high face-off percentage. He's great at winning and do that. He's a good power play center. And another thing too, you sign him to say 3, 4 years. Say you get him at 6 million, maybe seven. Okay, that's a little high, but that's a bridge center for Dalivor Dvorsky. Gives him time to grow, to mature. So that way, in that second year of the Tavares contract, he's playing on a wing position or maybe third line center, depending on what happens with the Blues.
Yep.
And then once Tavares is done, then Dvorsky could slide right into the 2C spot without an issue. Another guy that would be more of a 3C option is Pius Suter from the Vancouver Canucks. And I like that too, in that it's contingent on if Braden Shen can come back and be as viable as he was last season. He did have a drop off in his points, Shen did, but I think he could still be a very good 2C if you get someone like a Pius Suter to play that 3C spot. Then you can move Sundquist down to the fourth line, because it's very 50-50 if Brad Foska re-signs with the Blues.
Yep, I would agree. And plus, one other plus side to Pius Suter, which this was something that I really thought was in favor for the Blues. I mean, whenever he was playing with Vancouver, they used him more as like a utility center. If something wasn't going right with one of the other lines, they moved Pius to one of those positions. So, I mean, if you are able to grab Pius Suter at a projected 4-year or 3 to 4 year, 4.9 million per year contract, I think that's a little bit more feasible for the Blues now, that in the eyes of, if you are looking at another player to go look at in free agency, maybe a defenseman or something, if you're able to get rid of Nick Leddy and Justin Falk, that would be a player that if Shen isn't playing up to par of what the Blues are looking to him to be doing, you can maybe flip-flop Pius Suter and Braden Shen to see if he's able to play better in that 2C role. Another player that I did see that fits right into that bridge center role, like what you were talking about with Dalibor Dvorsky, and I've heard a lot of talk about this, was Michael Granlund, because he was projected. He was projected of looking for like a 2-year deal, maybe 4.85 million per year. And he hit with his experience and everything that he's had with Dallas and previously with San Jose. He has that versatility that you can really use. His experience are a plus, and he's a very good special teams player. So that's something that, I mean, if you have him in a second line role, third line role for center, depending on how you see him playing, you see Shen playing, I feel like that's something that could benefit well within that second, third line area of the team for like a middle center role.
Yeah, I like the idea of having that Swiss Army knife center to fill in, like either it be Suter or Granlund. They could fill into that second line or that third line as needed, depending on how Shen plays or whatever else moves they make to solidify the centers.
Yeah, because granted, both Pius and Michael Granlund, they're a little bit in their high 20s, low 30s, but I mean, both of those guys, I mean, Pius Suter, he had 46 points this past year, 25 goals. Michael Granlund had 26 points, 22 goals. So, I mean, both of those guys, I feel like, wouldn't be very bad options. They both had relatively about 18, 19 average ice time. So I felt like those are both players that would be beneficial to the St. Louis Blues. Kind of rolling from that, I know we've talked a lot about centers so far, and we've also said that we were looking at defensemen as well for the Blues. a couple of defensemen that I thought that the Blues could really go out and grab from free agency. There, after I kind of got this list together, I noticed that there's probably a third one, especially if they go with somebody in the center position that's a little bit lower in the AAV realm. Um, Two of the guys that I found was one was Dmitry Orlov from Carolina Hurricanes, or Ryan Lindgren from Colorado Avalanche. And these are both guys that, when Lindgren was with New York and then eventually to Colorado, they both kind of had. It seemed like these guys both really didn't gel well with the teams that they were respective to. Um, Dmitry Orlov, he is a excellent two-way defenseman. Wasn't really a good fit in Carolina, and that was kind of the same way with Ryan Lindgren, who is a physical player, steady puck mover, and he was a very good on the PK. And both of them were looking, I think, about 3 years contract time for the upcoming contracts. And then I think Orlov was looking more at like a 5.8 AAV, whereas Lindgren was like a 4.1. So those are both, I would say, probably middle ground defensemen for probably the
Mhm.
Blues if they decide to go that route. But if they were saying, we put enough money into our center positions, we have the guys that we want from our own free agency guys, we're able to get rid of some of the pieces that we already have. Why not go after a little bit of a guy that we can maybe pair with Colton Parayko or something that we can have on that second line? Why not like a Aaron Ekblad? And I know he was looking in the realm of like a 7.98 AAV and maybe a little bit longer contract. But that's a defenseman that you can pair with Colton Parayko and have for a significant amount of time until you have maybe Otto Stenberg or Jirasek or one of the other guys that we talked earlier, Cameron Reed. If we end up making those types of moves, those are all defensemen that I felt like the Blues could go after potentially if they were able to get their uh, salary cap needs made. What were your thoughts, James?
I think that's you got a cornucopia of different contracts there for free agent defensemen. Aaron Ekblad is going to be the probably the best free agent defenseman out there to get. So if you can sign him, that's a great move. He slots right into that second or third defensive. Obviously he's either going to be the number two or number three defenseman for your team. I would probably see him be paired with Broberg because I believe Ekblad is a right shot. I'd have to look that up real quick. Um, I believe he is, and he's got a lot of upside. He's good. He's solid defensively. He throws the puck in really well, and he was one of the better defensemen for the Panthers in their Stanley Cup run.
Yep.
And unfortunately, he's going to get priced out because they've got a lot of people to sign, and they've been saying the choice between him, Marchand, and Bennett, it's going to be the forwards, and Ekblad's going to see his way out just because they have a good defensive core and they think they could go on without him. But then
Yep.
when you get to Lindgren, really, I like that idea a lot because Lindgren is a younger Nick Leddy, where a smooth two-way defenseman, good skater, good puck mover. I would rather see that move, especially it would help out with the penalty kill and and probably the second power play unit in that sense. And signing any of those three, to me, that also helps in the thought process of how will Cam Feller do in his last year under contract.
Yep.
He is older, and you also have to look too. Colton Parayko is not a spring chicken. He's a great defenseman, but he's in his early 30s. He's had health issues before, and I love Parayko. He's one of my all-time favorite defensemen for the Blues. But you father time wins, so you have to start looking in the future. Where are you going to move? Where are you going to transition? So if you sign if you sign Ekblad, you got him for probably 7 years, 8 years, however they sign him. That's probably going to be the contract he gets.
Yep.
But if you get Lindgren, or who's the other defenseman,
Dmitry Orlov.
Orlov, you get those guys for like 4 year contracts, then that brings in Lidstein, that brings in Yurichek. Those guys will slide right in there. And plus, you still have Tyler Tucker, who really came into his own last year.
Oh,
And
I definitely agree.
it's a good way to think, like, if you could get these guys to that 3 4 year contract, those are bridge contracts to get your younger guys up here, and they're ready to go and contribute, and they don't have to be tested too early by getting thrown into like the second pairing with Philip Broberg.
Precisely. Yeah, I feel like those were all really good contracts. I mean, if you go with Orlov or Lindgren, yeah, that you're going to be looking at a more or less a bridge contract until those guys are able to come in. If you're looking at an Ekblad contract that where you're signing for 6, 7, 8 years, so that way you're able to make the uh, price per year affordable. You're looking at a guy that you're probably going to be having, like what you said, on that second line or first line, depending on how things are going with the pairings, and you can have a little bit more diversity with
Hmm.
the lineup on your defensive core. And because I mean, Aaron Ekblad, he's been a very versatile defenseman. He's very good on the offensive side of the puck. He's a very good defenseman on in their own, and whenever Florida was in their own zone. But I mean, I with either of those three defensemen, I didn't really see an issue or why the Blues wouldn't go after any of those three. Really,
Right, right,
any of the 5 or 6 guys that we've talked about here for free agency. I feel like those are all players that the Blues could potentially go out and grab. I don't really feel like there's any of them that are maybe outlandish that they could really not go after, but there's some that might be a little bit on the higher end of the spectrum that they might be a little bit of harder pieces to go out and get, like Tavares or
hmm,
Ekblad, just because of how sought after they are with either Toronto or Florida on their respective teams. I know that Toronto really wants to bring Tavares back. I know uh, Florida really wants to bring Aaron Ekblad back. So, I mean, seeing those types of guys and they're eager to stay with their teams, I feel like it's going to be harder to go out and get those types of players compared to some of the other guys that we talked about today.
right, right. And plus too, you got to think, you've got to re-sign Dylan Holloway and Philip Broberg next year. So that's another question mark. And I know the cap goes up, but it's not going up, $10 million a year. So if you're going to be looking to give uh, Dylan Holloway, if he's going to get, he'll probably look at like 7 to 8,
Yeah.
and Broberg might look at like 9 to 10, depending on what he does next year. So
Oh, yeah,
you
I
have
would
to keep
agree.
that in mind. If you want to sign Aaron Ekblad, that's all peachy keen, but you better start maneuvering some stuff, getting rid of some older contracts, so you can make room to re-sign not only Ekblad, but to get Broberg and Holloway under contract for the significant future.
I would agree. Because, I mean, not that this year is that we don't really have a whole lot of free agents coming up, but I mean, I know we've talked about it in previous episodes that we're going to be having, I think, close to what was it? I think like 10 or 11 free agents coming up next year. And I mean, in those 10 or 11, you're talking Cam Fowler, Dylan Holloway, Philip Broberg,
Hmm.
and just an abundance of guys that have been beneficial last year for this team that you're probably going to be looking to bring back. And if you do sign a little bit of a higher contract this year, you might be looking at some of those players and like, look, we want to have you guys back. If you're able to go with like a lower contract or a cheaper contract, then maybe we can work that out. But that's
Right.
something that they got to think about if they're wanting to go after somebody like Tavares or Ekblad.
Exactly. It's gonna be an interesting off. Well, I mean, this offseason's been interesting so far.
Yep,
They've already rebranded. Let's see where they stand in this coming year and see what moves they need to make. We all know what moves they need. It's just a matter of can they make them? That's the question.
for sure. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens within the NHL this next week to 2 weeks, because it's going to be. I have a feeling it's going to be a crazy next couple weeks with free agency starting and the draft, and it's
Hmm.
just the abundance of trades that are probably going to happen over the next week or two, or even the next several weeks, because we've seen it happen all the way up until like the second or third week of July before in previous off seasons that we've seen moves be made. So it'll be interesting to see what happens throughout the NHL and for the St. Louis Blues. Um, did you have anything that wanted to go over before we close out for today?
You know what? Other than I always like this when they announce the Hall of Fame, the inductees. I got to give huge props to seeing one of my all-time favorite players, Alexander Mogilny, finally make it to the Hall of Fame. A guy like that who scored 76 goals in 1 year, had over 500 goals, 1,000 points, won Stanley Cup, and he was the first Russian player to defect to the United States. This guy paved the way for Alex Ovechkin and Pavel Buchnevich, and all these Russian players have him to thank. And they finally gave him his chance, and it's well deserved. I will say I'm very disappointed that Keith Kachuk got overlooked again,
Yeah,
but I'm hoping that next year they give a call out to Walt. That'll be great next year if his name gets called. So
for sure. Yeah, I was bummed to not see Kachuk on the ballot or not make it in this season, but they're for sure. Hopefully next time. But thank you guys, whoever was able to come out and actually be a part of the show today and talking about the rebranding and the abundance of things that are to come with free agency and possible trades for the St. Louis Blues in the next coming days, if not weeks. If you want to see more of our content for the Blues or any of the other St. Louis sports teams, be sure to like, subscribe to the channel for the St. Louis Sports, and we will see you guys in the next episode.
go
See ya.
Blues.